Hello everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith and this is Helionox, and it's a game which is currently running on Kickstarter, and in the last video we covered a really high level overview of the game. We didn't go into too many specifics. I just tried to give you just enough of a taste of the rules and some of the things you can do. And now what I want to do is not just talk about what happens on your turn as an architect, but also talk about what happens in the Shadow Syndicate turn in terms of what they do, and then maybe play through one more round just to show you guys kind of how it works a little bit further, and a couple other things that I also didn't mention in the previous video. So when the Shadow Syndicate initiates, which is essentially at the end of your turn, so once you've gone through your turn sequence, the Shadow Syndicate kind of wakes up and does its thing. What the Shadow Syndicate will do on the first thing it does is it scores an event. Now, what does it mean by that? Well, there's all kinds of events in this deck. So let's say hypothetically, and in solo, what ends up happening is you start drawing 2 cards from the event deck going forward. So you end up starting to draw 2 cards. So you go like this. Now, on the very first one, you only have 1 out. So if I went and solved it, then boom, I've got a leg up at the start, which is nice to have. I went and solved that event that we saw in the last video, and that helps me out. But going forward, 2 events will be drawn every time. So the problem with that is it becomes a little bit of a battle, because the first one was easy, but now you're kind of sitting there going, okay, so there's 1 here that's 3 defense and is worth 3 points. There's 1 here that's 3 defense and worth 3 points. I've either got to get both of them off the board into my victory display, or the Shadow Syndicate's going to come in and take whichever's higher. And in this case, you would just take whichever's left, or you can pick for them. So let's say hypothetically this was what was on the board, and let's hypothetically say right now it's the Shadow Syndicate's turn, and my turn had just ended, and these were the 2 events still on the board, and I wasn't able to get to them. I wasn't able to spend defense from my hand in order to gain them in my victory display. The Shadow Syndicate at this point actually gains 1 of those event cards. Now, because they're equal, it is up to you as to which one you want to give. So you might sit there and say, well, I'm adjacent to this one. I have that adjacent ability, blah, 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 blah. There might be a strategic reason as to why, but you might go, you know what, the one on Earth, I'll give that one to him. So that goes in his victory display. So he takes that from you. Now he's up 3. He's got 3 influence, and originally I had 2 because I had solved the prior event in the last turn. So as of right now, he's actually ahead of me. The other thing the Shadow Syndicate does on its turn, which is nasty, if it's tied, you don't just kind of go ape and pick whichever one you want. My apologies. You pick whichever one is closest to Earth, and ironically, the one I chose was on Earth, so I was safe there regardless, but I just want to clarify that. So secondly, what you do is it scores the highest influence, or the highest cost card in the market. If tied, you get to choose. So it's kind of an interesting one. So you're going to go basically in here and you're going to go, okay, so what's the highest influence card? Okay, so it's the municipal carrier, the transport tech card. So this card, now on your turn, like we tried to do, we're allowed to cycle 1 card in the market. And this is where you can start to mitigate the market, because you know the syndicate's going to come in here and go, okay, which one's the highest influence? This one. Well, if you learn to remember to use that ability to cycle 1 card in the market when you're playing solo, you're able to have a chance to cycle that back underneath and hopefully pull up like a 1 or a 0, and then in that case you're keeping his influence points, because he's always going to be getting something from here, but at least you don't want to give him 2s and higher. Obviously, that's going to give him real big leg ups, especially when defending a planet is 3. Pulling a 2 right off the top is a really easy way for them to gain influence. So anyway, the Shadow Syndicate came in, it already did the old world thing and took that event clear off, doesn't need to spend anything to do it, and then it's going to come in here and say, this is mine. And so it goes in there into the victory display for the Syndicate as well. And then of course this flips up and is now revealed for you. Now look at this guy. So this one's a 3. This is one you would not want to be sitting in there for the Shadow Syndicate, to be able to pick up and add to his victory display, because that's like basically defeating an event on a planet. So that essentially is what the Shadow Syndicate's going to do. And of course, as he scores and stuff like that, it's all going to go into his inactive pile. At the very end of the game, there's a way to calculate how the Syndicate's points add up and all this kind of stuff. And I'll explain that near the end of this video. I'm going to go back into hypothetically again, because we're not really playing this through. I'm just kind of walking you through this. we're going to move back to our turn as if it was back to me again. Now we remember our deck here is down to 1 card. You can see we've discarded cards from the last turn we did. We have a deck, or we have a hand of cards here. We're back here to the event phase. So what do we always do at the beginning of the event phase? We get rid of cryo counters. So 1 cryo counter goes away and there's still 1. So we still have to wait for that to come off, and then we'll be able to use those abilities off the human architect, the strategist that I've chosen. So that's good. We flip any inactive events. Now, currently, for my explanation, for me explaining things, sorry, this wasn't here. So really, this should be here. But let's just say for crazy's sake, we're going to put it here. I'm actually going to do this differently. How about I'll show you 2 different ones. Let's just say things got crazy. Let's say I was terrible, and for some strange reason, all of this stuff was out on the board, right? And I wasn't able to use defense to close it. This is what was here, and now it literally says flip any inactive events. Inactive events sit just like this. It even says on the card, inactive event. So every single inactive event on a planet flips. At this point, this one would flip, and what ends up happening is things can change on it. So what happens is you'll notice nothing changed in terms of the influence and the number of defense that needed to be used in order to defeat this. But what did change is this, and you'll notice these little icons here, and what those mean are very specific to what you can do in order to essentially remove that card. So you can discard, the first one there says that you can discard a particular faction card to overcome an event displaying this. So you're allowed to throw away a faction card, but in this case you need to do both. You need to just throw away a faction card of that particular symbol, and also just go ahead and discard any card to overcome an event displaying this. If the card shows more than 1, discard all types shown. So essentially, you can go ahead if you want to, and as of right now, you can see when you look up in your icons for the cards in your hand, I don't have that particular circle with the orange in it. I only have this one here, but guess what? If you look over here, you'll realize, oh, look, in the market, you can purchase cards that have that circle. So strategically, you might sit and go, oh, you know what, if I really want to get that and I don't have the defense to make it happen, especially this turn, which seems to be the case because I've got 1 defense and 1, 2, 3 credits with a card that just allows me to get rid of cryo counters. You know, I might sit there and go, maybe there's a way that I can go after purchasing this card, which is a 5, which is super expensive, and I can't purchase that right now from what I'm understanding. So that's a little bit rough. But there's ways to make things work. There's ways to make things work, and more so than you think. And you can do some really cool combinations. So let's just continue with the or flipping the inactive event. So we flip this one. I've already explained that you can throw cards away in order to defeat it, or you can use defense to defeat it. Now we flip this one. A 5 is always considered a catastrophic event. It's the worst type of event you can get, and it's usually terrible. And it'll even say it right on it. Active catastrophic event for the European world. So it's obviously going to affect the color that it is showing. So sorry, I had to put it on the wrong one. It should have actually been down here. This is the European warp installation, and this is the one that affects it. So it says at that European warp installation, the collapse of the Shitran Rift, I don't even know how to say that. All players that do not control an embassy here lose 2 influence. While active, all locations are shut down. So this would sit here. Not only we would lose influence because I haven't actually put any embassies out yet. So we would lose 2 influence, which is bad. And also, while this is in play and not defeated, these things here, which are considered garrison tokens, and I just want to double check to be sure that I'm saying that correctly. Yes. It's a garrison token. These garrison tokens go on every single location. And the idea with these garrison tokens is they're essentially shutting down the location. And when they're shut down, well, it's just not good because you're not allowed to go ahead and use certain abilities on the cards and stuff like that. It affects things and limits you in terms of what you're allowed to do. You're not allowed to use your key access and things like that. And so there's a number of bad things that can happen when things are shut down there, and that's and of course things like picking up cargo. So say for instance you're in the middle of doing your request. Well, once that has happened, you can't pick up cargo because that particular planet has shut down. It's thematic because you think of it, if a gigantic catastrophic event occurred at world, you wouldn't be running in there going, hey, let me pick up my cargo and deliver it to Mars. Like, no, they just had a really terrible experience. They've shut down. That's the idea of these garrison tokens, and they basically go across every single one of these. And there are ways to remove them. In the rulebook, it says a garrison can be removed from a location by paying 1 credit or 1 defense to get rid of them. So you can, even if one's sitting on a spot that you could pay a credit or 1 defense to get rid of it. So there's ways to get around it, but it's going to slow you down a bit. So that is essentially what happens when you flip those things. So let's just say that hypothetically those things are in play. And then I could sit here and go, okay, it's my turn now. Well, I've got 1, 2, 3 credits. I've got this really cool card here that's it's a hyper accelerant card, legal tech, and it says consume 1 card from your deck, your hand, or your discard pile, and remove a cryo. So the really cool thing about this is I only have 1 cryo left, and I can use any ability I want. So maybe what I'll do is I'll sit there and say, you know what, defense-wise, there's no way in heck that I'm going to be able to, there's just no way that I'm going to be able to get, the thing, what makes this game really interesting is the fact that there's so many different options. You could sit here and min-max your decisions forever. If you're playing this solo, you could sit here and say, well, there's probably a few different things you can do in terms of moving, purchasing cards. I have to be aware of the fact that the Syndicate's going to want to take this particular sub-like captain from me. When the Syndicate goes, it's going to try to take the highest active event currently in play. And so if I didn't explain that correctly in the last one or very vaguely, what I meant to say was when the Syndicate goes ahead and is ready to pull a card from here, he will take first the highest influence active event. If there is none, then he's going to go after the non-active ones, and it's always going to be the highest influence. So in this case, if he was to activate, he'd be taking this one away and gaining 5 influence from it, and he would be leaving that one. So this is kind of on my turn. I'd be sitting there going, geez, I wish I could get 5 defense so I could get down here and hopefully be able to, shut this off before he gets it. Sadly, I only have 1 defense, so I'm really, not looking too good. I have lots of credits. So you could come up here and go, can I afford anything? Not really. I can't really afford much of anything right now. Which is pretty nasty, to be honest. But you'll notice here, there's a special ability here. And this is where you have to keep your eyes on your cards because there's a lot of things you can do. It says, like, consume 1 card from your hand to obtain 1 prime asset. And you might go, well, what the heck is that? That doesn't seem worthwhile. Obtaining a prime asset is these cards. They're not considered part of the market. You don't buy these. These are the market cards. These are the prime assets. Prime assets, essentially, are just very similar to your market assets, or material assets, sorry. Instead of gaining 1 credit, though, when you have them in your hand, they're 2. So they're even more useful for buying things. So they're very, very good that way. So I could sit there and say, consume 1 card from your hand to do that. This one here says that I have to gain an infamy token in order to use this. But if I do, you consume 1 card from your deck, hand, or discard pile, and you can remove a cryo. So I could sit there and say, let's just hypothetically say I did this. Let's say, like, okay, I'm going to discard this card to do this. I gain 1 infamy token. Now, I don't have an infamy token in this prototype, but there actually are. They would essentially be tokens like this, but be red. And so essentially I would gain 1 of those tokens. They're going to be negative against me when I total up my score at the very, very end of the game. So you're going to get an infamy token against you, and you can consume 1 card from your deck, hand, or discard pile. So I could just sit there and say, well, you know what, I'm going to get rid of, I'm not defending anything this turn because I have a really weak defense, and to be totally honest, I don't have enough defense to get any of these, so I'll get rid of this one. So it gets consumed. When it's consumed, it's gone, and it's taken out of your deck and doesn't come back into your deck. But the cool thing is that card allowed me to, it's a hyper accelerant, so thematically it allowed me to come out of cryo faster. And the cool thing is I could go back into cryo in order to do something real fast. So I could sit there and say, oh, let's see, I can draw a card, gain a key access if available, or move to an adjacent location. So what I could do is I could go, very interesting. Let's see. Yeah, let's just say, like, move to adjacent location. So I'll just go 1, 2. This is going to get my ship to fly to here, and then from here you have abilities. This is still shut down though, so there's some limits in terms of what I can do. But essentially, I have just the 3 credits remaining in my hand here. So this is where things are going to get a little tight. I have it's a bad example on camera right now because I can't buy anything from the market currently. I can spend a credit to get rid of this. So I could spend 1 credit to get rid of this token, but then even if I gain something from this, I'm still 3 and I'm still short because everything here costs 4. So using money-wise, I'm kind of hurting. So this would not be a good example. Oh, and sorry, I also totally forgot to mention, once I did my little illegal tech move and I went to Mars and I picked up that, and I dropped off that cargo, this request is gone. It is no longer in play. There's 7 requests all the time, or there's 7 requests in the deck when you build it to play solo, so the one is done and you get a new one essentially that sits here. And just so you know, these are prototype as well, they're all paper. So the next one says, you know, jump to Earth and then go to the belt from there. So you're going to be going from green to yellow, and that's really bright. It looks like white. So I have to go all the way to the old world, So I might sit there and say, this is a lost cause. I'm not going to get either of these. Let's just go for that cargo and try to build my deck stronger because I have a really weak deck. I could go, okay, I'm going to spend $2 here. $2 to basically book it all the way over to the old world capital. And then I'm going to, well, actually, that's the funny part. Now it's like, because I haven't done a good job in terms of money management and things like that, I'd have to have 2 credits in order to get a cargo. So the thing is, I'm playing this on the fly and I'm not really thinking strategy right now. So please forgive me. I'm not actually trying to defeat this or do well. I'm just kind of showing you the intricacies of the movement and what you can do. But the cool idea is that as you gain cards, so hypothetically, if I was to pay for this card, it would go on top of my deck and stuff like this, and then eventually I gain an illegal tech from delivering cargo and stuff like this. So your deck is slowly kind of building, and cards flip over, and of course, at the end of your turn, this nasty Shadow Syndicate dude is going to be going, aha, nice, you left me a 5 catastrophic event, thank you very much, it's going into my score pile. Oh, you left the sub-like captain, it's going. So you can see how if you're not on top of your game, you are going to get beat up. And that's what makes it fun, because when you're playing solo, you want a challenge. You don't want something that's going to just be a breeze. So it really makes you sit there and think, how do I ensure this is going to work out in my favor? And it's an interesting game. I can tell, like, the bare minimum is very, very interesting. So what'll end up happening is, I haven't done any shuffling yet, but eventually you burn all the cards in your hand, and even through you play your next rounds, all your cards get burned, and then finally after usually by the second round, or maybe third round, you've got enough cards in your hand that were not there before. And so you're shuffling your deck, and you're going to go and you're going to grab yourself 5 cards. And this is where things get interesting, because you start seeing, oh, this is terrible because I didn't shuffle well. But hopefully you don't pull a hand like this, because this is just all your basic cards again. But let's just say, hypothetically, those were gone. Like, you'll pull cards and they will accumulate to something really interesting and unique, because like all of a sudden the illegal tech starts showing up, and oh, the market card that you picked up shows up, and then you start going, okay, you know what? Like before, when I only had one option in terms of just doing defense and market stuff, now I've got all these special abilities across the bottom, and I can start comboing things and really, really, really making this. I think I just made my camera sick. Sorry, guys. And so you can see the main phase has so many different things that you can do inside of it. And as long as you have the cards and the money and all that kind of stuff in order to do it, and the credits, you can keep going until you burn out of cards. But anyway, this essentially is the game Helionox. And I believe at this point I've talked about everything. So again, we've already covered embassies. You pay 2 credits in order to put them down. At the very, very end of the game, when you're actually totaling up your score, as you know, for yourself as a solo player, you're obviously totaling all the influence that you've gained through the cards you've collected. So you're going to look at cards like this and go, oh, I added this one to my deck through the market. How much influence does it gain me? That kind of thing. You're adding those all up. You're adding things up like your any kind of market credits you have, or influence you got, from your active and closed off events, things like that. And you'll total those all up based on the rule book, which I will mention is a work in progress to this point. I do have a copy of it right now, but it's not, and I don't believe it's the final version. I believe it's like 90% complete. So there are a couple things I think he's still fleshing out, but for the most part, it's pretty much bang on. But there are a couple things he's fleshing out still. And then you come over here to the Syndicate player, and at the end of the game, the Syndicate's going to do things like, it's going to look at things like all requests that haven't been done. So it'll come over here and go, oh, you only did 1 request? Well, guess what? Now the Syndicate gets to cash in because you didn't do your request. all requests that are still in the request deck are added to the Syndicate's score pile, which is really nasty. And then the Syndicate gains 3 influence for each illegal tech still at a location. So if you only picked up 2 illegal tech, the Syndicate's going to get 3, 3, and 3. So 9 influence across those 3 cards because you never picked them up. And like I said before, even though they have infamy on the bottom and they seem bad, they have great abilities. And as long as you can get them into your deck, and then get them out by using cards like Frozen Repository, which allows you to consume a card, consume this card or 1 card from your hand, you can really play the game smart and actually come out with a really nice score. This is one of the biggest additions in the Deluxe that I really, really like. I like the requests. I think they're cool, the cargo moving around. But the reason that this cargo stuff makes any sense is the fact that you do get the ability to go after these illegal tech, and you can also get higher amounts of market credits, giving you the ability to buy more market cards. But I can tell you this illegal tech stuff is really interesting because it's a very, very much a, do you want to go after these really, really powerful cards, get them in your deck, and run the risk of not being able to get them out of your deck by the end of the game and losing and having infamy points count against you. If you can gain this card, it goes into your deck, use it for countless rounds and stuff like that. Once the event deck runs out, like once this deck is burnt, which in every single time you're playing solo, 2 cards are coming out, 2 cards are coming out, you get about, I think, 9 rounds or maybe 10 rounds, and then the game is over. And at that point, that's when you total up all these scores to find out whether or not you have a higher influence value than the Shadow Syndicate. And you don't want to see the Shadow Syndicate with the higher influence value. I just think the illegal tech, to me, is the coolest addition to the game, being that it's very much a, here I am. Like, the game knows that it looks tempting to go after these things. They have great abilities, but truly, as a player, is it worth it to go after these cards if there's a chance you may not be able to get rid of it? And this is very much where you have to start going, yeah, I'm building things because I want to accrue more credits or I want something like that. But eventually you start looking at cards and going, oh, you know what? The field commander says gain 2 shield or draw a card. You know what? For going after events that occur randomly, this seems like a really worthwhile card. Whereas somebody else might look at this one and say, oh, what's the holo key code? This one says gain key access if available. So basically meaning if you don't even have an embassy down here, you can actually use that bottom ability. Even though it requires an embassy token, you don't have it. As long as you have the holo key, you can get access inside of that mining colony and gain that 3 credits. There's a lot of strategy in terms of playing around inside of the world and min-maxing. It's really cool that way. And at the very beginning, you're just trying to make a better deck for the first 2 rounds-ish. And once you get going, you start creating this deck that when you start drawing cards, it really starts to open up. So anyway, as a solo game, I recommend it. I think it's really fun. So if you are interested and this has given you guys any help and ideas to how the game is played, I hope it has. I know this is probably a little bit quicker and less specific and also more high level than anything I've done in the past, but that's because the Kickstarter is currently ongoing and I recently had my first daughter and first child in the family. So for me, it's been extremely busy time, so I haven't had as much time to dedicate to this one as I want to, but I can tell you that this is one that may see a playthrough series. If you guys are interested, let me know in the comments below, give me a thumbs up, and hey, maybe we'll play through this as a solo as a solo series, but I just want to make sure there's some interest there, and if there is, we'll go with it. But hopefully, at least in terms of the Kickstarter, this gives you an idea as to what you're going to get and an idea of how it plays if it's something that interests you. So, again, guys, thanks a lot for the support and the comments, and until next time, keep on rolling solo.